Oh Lord, good evening and happy Tuesday to everybody. Welcome to another episode. Actually, no, not another episode. I say another episode. This is the very first episode of RUWeebs Live with Paranormal Warehouse. So welcome everybody. We had a little technical difficulty at the beginning. I'm still trying to figure out if we are live on Paranormal Warehouse. Number one. We are. Oh, damn. Okay. So, thank you to everybody for tuning in. My name is Annie Weible. My friends call me Weebs, and I'm so glad to be a part of Paranormal Warehouse. So, RUWeebs Live started about a year ago. I've been doing live radio for a while. So, a little bit about me, if you don't know me. I am a paranormal investigator with a team called Resident Undead. I do a podcast with the amazing Brendan Shea called Serial Spirits. And so a couple of months ago, Paranormal Warehouse handed this invitation to me to be a part of one of their shows. And I was like, you know what? Let's do this. And so here I am tonight for the very first time and super freaking excited to be a part of Paranormal Warehouse. So thank you to everyone who has made this possible, who's been my tech support, Mike Diamond, Daryl Marston. You guys are amazing. I literally had to call him right before I came on here, and it's been great. So if you guys are watching right now on Paranormal Warehouse, tell me where you're watching from. Thank you for being part of this show. Sorry, I've still got to turn my my volume down here. Thank you guys for being part of this. People are already in the conversation. So RUWeebs Live is going to be kind of a mixture of everything that I consider to be the unknown. So we're going to talk ghosts. We're going to talk haunted places. We're going to talk serial killers, true crime, murder. We are going to talk legends and cryptids and all this crazy state. So thanks. Everybody's tuning in right now. Kimberly in Missouri, Teresa, Mississippi, Chris, my brother in Indiana, Lansing, Michigan. Where else we got here? Lucretia, thank you so much for tuning in. Mindy Jackson, thank you. Thomas, Jarhita, Kimberly, you got Elizabeth. Thank you guys so much, so much for tuning in. It's an honor to be part of Paranormal Warehouse. If you guys like the show, please feel free to share it. Give us a 5-star rating. If you don't like it, then just don't say anything about it. I'm just kidding. Just move on. Move on. So, Scotland. We've got Scotland on here. Thank you. That's amazing. So, yeah, if you guys enjoy the show, please feel free to leave your comments. Leave us a 5-star rating on Facebook. You guys are amazing, and I'm humbled and grateful for everyone who has tuned in. So, to get started, since we're a little late tuning in, I had a little bit of technical difficulties working through it. My guest tonight is a dear friend. You see her mug right here beside mine, that lovely mug. So, like I said before, RUWeebs Live, we don't just talk about ghosts. We love to talk about all that is depraved and vile and that we consider paranormal, which is above our normal. And so I am super glad to bring on my friend Chandler Altieri. Chandler is a TV producer and a true crime junkie, just like I am. And so when I reached out to her and said, can we do a show together? She was like, yeah, who do you want to talk about? And I'm like, who do you think we want to talk about right now? So, enough with all the gore. Let's get down to the gore. Let's talk about Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy. Listen, this is my first show on Warehouse, and I have already gotten hate mail about covering true crime, that I am like glorifying these murderers. No, that is not what we're doing right now. Yes, we call this, I called this our Serial Killers Anonymous show, number 1. But the reason I do that is because I feel like people feel like it's very taboo to talk about these types of crimes. And so once people find out that I talk, oh my God, Gracie, you're so rude.
I got Charlie too, so we're good.
Gracie and Charlie are a match made in hell because they only want to interfere with us when they get on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
So people want to hear these stories. And Chandler, you and I have talked about the new Netflix series, The Ted Bundy Tapes. So, number 1, give me your initial take on the Ted Bundy tapes. What was your overall rating?
I didn't like it. I feel like it wasn't new information. I knew all of that stuff, and I really I go to Netflix because I want to get into the nitty gritty. Like, Netflix goes where other people don't go.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see it on regular TV, but they didn't do that. And that, to me, that was very disappointing. I needed gross details.
Yes, thank you. Grit. Yes.
Yeah. So what did you think about, you watched them all. Did you watch them all in one night?
Shay and I watched all of them in probably a 48-hour period. I was disappointed. So for what I'm going to say on this show, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5 knives. So instead of stars, we're going to give things knives on this show, since we're all about the gore and all that kind of stuff. The Bundy Tapes is going to get 3.5 out of 5 knives on my rating, and that's because I feel like they how would I say this? They gave him a much more Hollywood, I don't want to say introduction, but basically the Ted Bundy Tapes, the Netflix series, was taken from a book that had been done around the time that Bundy was electrocuted. He was electrocuted, in, I think it was 1989, so he was executed then. And I just felt like they left out a lot of details about his life and his crimes that people want and need to know. So when you're talking about getting down to the nitty gritty, I made a list of my top 10 things here that they did not cover that I want to talk about, that I love. Not that I love, but the things that I feel like if people are going to know anything about Ted Bundy, that's the shit that they need to know. It's not the stuff that was covered. And literally, I got online right before I got on here, and I found, or I saw an article that said 9 hours ago that the movie that Zac Efron is in, where he is supposed to portray Ted Bundy, was just picked up by Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's hold up. Okay. So did you guys do all this together, knowing that this is how it's going to come out? Because if you did, that's not going to get viewers. That's not the shit that you want to portray. And so I made a list of the top Ted Bundy facts that I feel like they didn't cover in the Ted Bundy files well enough, that people really need to know about his crimes and what happened with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually think that it's the same director that did the Ted Bundy tapes, and he's also doing the Zac Efron movie.
That's interesting to know, because it makes sense knowing that this comes out and then that's going to come back, you know, because it aired at Sundance.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, okay, it's going to go straight to Netflix. Okay, what were the Ted Bundy tapes the lead up to what you want us to know about Ted Bundy going into this movie? Because from what I understand, it's like the movie, I don't want to say it glorifies him, but they portray him in this, oh, come on, it's Zac Efron. This is Zac Efron that you've got playing probably the most prolific serial killer in the United States in any history. So, if you want to talk about that, then, okay, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, like, I would be interested to know if the movie is going to go into the details or not, because I know it got a lot of backlash for the promos, and people were saying that it looked like it was a superhero movie, the music didn't match, all of that, and I disagreed with that, because if you know Ted Bundy, you know he's charismatic, you know he was well liked, you know he was handsome, you know, or not, he wasn't ugly.
He wasn't ugly. He looks like Zac Efron.
Yeah. Like, he looks like he could be Zac Efron's, like, dirty uncle. You know?
He was the dirty uncle from High School Musical. Oh my God, how did we forget that?
He was the one, like, hiding behind the bleachers, like, lurking by the concession stand.
He was the old drunk uncle behind the bleachers that was like, yeah, Troy.
He's like, get your head in the game. I've got a head in a bag. Like,
yes.
Yeah, 100%. And
That's it right there. And I think when you bring somebody in who looks like that, and you know that in all of this stuff that they've had going on in history, oh my God, he was a player. Number one, yeah. He played every freaking body that he touched, from the minute that he was old enough to commit a crime until the minute that they put him in the freaking chair. Mm-hmm. He absolutely, he was the biggest narcissist that you can imagine. So, okay, I'm going to dive into some of my Bundy facts right now that kind of play into this. And so, some of the top 10 facts that the Ted Bundy tapes did not touch on either at all or enough in this series, in my opinion. Number one would have been his childhood. So, like a lot of other documented serial killers, this kid definitely had mommy issues. Mm-hmm. You go back to the mother issues. So, number one, Ted Bundy was born at a home for unwed mothers in Vermont. His mom got pregnant as a teenager. They sent her away to this home for unwed mothers, and that's where Bundy was born. His mother, Louise, claimed that his father was a couple of different people in the military. She even gave different names that later on these journalists said that they checked into and were never able to substantiate that any of these people had ever been part of the military, let alone that they were connected back to him. Mm-hmm. And also, okay, this is what gets me. Some of the members of the Bundy family suspected that Ted was the product of an incestuous relationship between his mother and her abusive father. So some people actually claimed that Ted Bundy's grandfather was also his father, who raped his mother when she was a teenager.
Yep. Yeah, and he was raised, too, believing that his grandparents were his real parents, and that his mom was his sister. And he always, like, he hated that his mom, like, never talked about his dad. But that totally makes sense, because, like, also, his grandfather was, like you said, severely abusive to his wife. He also, like, beat the dog. He would, like, beat up on neighborhood pets. Like, he was just a very horrific man.
He was terrible.
Yes. And, like, people believe that he also either sexually abused Ted or beat on Ted. So that, I think that definitely, as we've talked about before, that those, like, pivotal moments growing up, that's what shapes your mind, and that's what shapes, like, who you are. So, makes sense.
Whether or not that was, just this horrible family secret that was never brought to light, or, did it really happen? Nobody's ever going to know. I don't think anybody is ever going to know. And if you watch this series, you realize that they interview or talk with his mother a couple of times, and she's so nonchalant about when they start talking about Ted Bundy's crimes that he has committed. She literally at one point stops the interviewers, and she looks at them and she goes, "Okay, who's ready for cake and ice cream?" And it's like, what? We just talked about your son having sex with dead bodies, and that's the stuff you want to talk about? You want to give us cake and ice cream? You're the source of the problem.
Yeah, it's like, sure, we'll take it, but I just got whiplash from, like, everything that just happened. I mean, okay.
It's just so mind-boggling. I remember watching that part of the interview, and I'm like, where does this come from?
I think, like, she was such a devout Christian that I don't know if at that point she had, like, prayed to God to absolve the sins or whatever, but it was completely like she was just in denial. And we also saw, like, you saw her, like, crying, and she's like, oh, he definitely didn't do it. And then, yeah, they're like, no, but he did, and this is what's going to happen to him. And then, yeah, she's like, oh, who wants cake and ice cream?
Right. I think it was her coping mechanisms, like, oh my God, where does this come from? Like, this is how you cope, is you pretend like it didn't happen. You pretend like your child didn't do that sort of thing. And so, so the second fact that I thought was interesting, he was arrested twice during his high school years for burglary and suspected theft. So even that early, you are seeing the signs of someone who is deviating from the law, who kind of steps out and does his own thing, but somehow also gets away with it. So you see him transitioning from this really screwed up childhood that he had, not knowing who his father was. He kind of dabbles in theft and all this shit at the same time. So then you get into, college-aged Ted Bundy. And he really kind of becomes, by all sense and purposes, this model citizen that people start looking up to. And it's freaking weird. So in college, he was a psych major. He graduated with a psychology degree. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline. I can't right now.
I know. I know.
He volunteers at a suicide prevention hotline, and I remember, I don't know if this was the documentary that I watched, or if it was another something that I read, that his supervisor there said he was a very kind and empathic person. And I'm like, who the hell did y'all see? Like, while he was there?
Yeah. But I think, like, that's what makes him so, to me, fascinating, is I love the psychology behind all of that. I think he also, like, worked to help find missing women.
He did. So that was another, that during his early adulthood, he volunteered with some type of local emergency services where he actually, oh my God, who is this?
This is Lucy. Sorry, she was meowing for some screen time.
Lucy, we love our cats. If you learn anything about Chandler and I right now, it's that we're super huge animal lovers, and our cats are always lurking around here waiting for some screen time. So you learn that he actually had a part in some of the emergency services searches for these women during the period that he confessed to murdering some of these women that he helped search for.
Easy.
And it's like, you hear about these criminals who will, they'll kind of come back and circle the crime scene and the area and attempt to help with local police investigations. And you see that come full circle with Ted Bundy and the way that he came back around. But he did it in a more prolific way that he actually worked for these people. He helped with some of these responders who went out and responded to some of the crimes that he said he committed. That's crazy.
It's crazy. Talk. And that plays into his narcissism because he loved that attention. And I'm sure you'll mention this, but when he was in court, like having people actually recount the details of the crime scene, like he very much got off on all of that. And, like, loved the idea of hearing it and hearing other people's experiences. And also, he took pleasure in being the smartest person in the room. And, honestly, he might have been. He was a lot smarter than some of the cops that worked those cases.
You know, he probably was. And so that brings us into so we leave the time period of when he was, not known for doing these crimes. So he was arrested for the suspected murder of a woman. So Ted Bundy escaped from prison not once but twice. So the first time that he escaped from prison, he literally jumped from a window and ran into the forest by himself.
In a cardigan.
A cardigan, guys. How are you going to exist in the forest out there? Number one. So he runs out there and lives for, a few days up to a week. And he eventually is detained again.
He was detained because I think this is where he sprained his ankle and then was just like, I'm cold and I'm hungry. I'm going to walk back.
He gave in. He went back and he was like, y'all, I'm kind of cold right now. I'm kind of hungry. I want to go back to prison where everything was nice.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just looking for a Waffle House. He's like, I just need a Waffle House. And then this like doofy police officer arrests him, and then in the thing he's like, yeah, I arrested Ted Bundy. Right. It was like, no, Ted Bundy was going for some hash browns. Like, you happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Listen, they said he lost 25 pounds in that week. I want to know what kind of diet. I want to be on the Ted Bundy diet that week.
Yes.
So he goes out, he loses 25 pounds, he decides he's ready to go back to prison. And so he goes back. Bitch goes back to prison. And so he's there, and I think it's December of, I want to say 1978, so December 30th, he decides he's going to escape from prison a second time. And so, but he's been leading up to this. So at this point, Ted Bundy has decided he is going to kind of represent himself as his own attorney. He's not an attorney. He went to law school. He has no type of degree and that sort of thing. He decides he's going to be his own attorney, that he knows better than everybody else. And so he's going to the law library there. He's getting all of his books. He's getting his files. He's got a credit card.
I know.
Ted Bundy has a credit card. I don't know where this came from. So that he can represent himself as an attorney.
And make calls with the card.
And make calls with this card. What do you even say about that?
It was hard enough for me to get a credit card, and, I have decent credit and, no rap sheet. I haven't even been in detention once. And we're going to give this, almost convicted, this rapist, maybe this possible killer, a credit card, and then we're going to let Carol Ann Boone smuggle in $500 while she's coming, I guess this was before her conjugal visits with him, but she's smuggling in snack cakes and money for him to just make this grand escape.
I want to see his credit karma report real quick.
I do
want
too.
to know what's going on over there.
I do too. What do you think he bought with his credit card?
I don't know. Well, okay, the only thing that I know that he bought with his credit card was a plane ticket from Colorado to Chicago.
And to me, what's so baffling about this is that there's so many things going on here. So the jailer's apartment was above him, and he just shimmied up there, tried on the jailer's clothes, and walked out the front door.
Legit into his closet. Into the jailer's closet.
And he had done several, what's so creepy about this, everything, but he had done several test runs. He had crawled through the ceilings of the jail trying to plan his escape route. And he did all of this unnoticed. And by the time the police actually recognized that he was gone, he was 17 hours gone and 1,000 miles away.
It's amazing to me. And this is, I had this conversation with a girl that I work with today. This is my theory, is that Ted Bundy was so freaking good at manipulating people that he manipulated people in that jail. I think he had people on the inside who were helping him because, okay, I've listened to a whole bunch of podcasts about this stuff. So they say that he had been sneaking all of these books and files into his cell. So that's how he he made a stack of them. He was able to get access into this ventilation area that was above his cell. So that's how he got up there. He went up there day after day after day, basically mapping out this prison, seeing how he could get out of here. And so he even started changing his sleep patterns. And so he would go to sleep later and later and sleep later through the day. So the prison guards would not bring his meals until 10 or 11 o'clock. And so they weren't checking on him at the same time during the day that they were checking on all these other prisoners. I'm sorry, but that is some type of special consideration.
I think so too, and I think also knowing that this prisoner is in here, for kidnapping and possibly murder, and he's escaped once by literally just jumping out the window.
Jumped out the window.
And we're not going to check on him. I 100% agree with you that Bundy had people in the jail that he had at least manipulated enough where they admired him.
Because you talk about Ted Bundy, while he was in prison, got married and fathered a child.
I know. The guards turned away while Carol Ann Boone and her Coke bottle glasses went on in and...
That's exactly right.
Like...
Carol Ann Boone walks in there because she is somebody who has become... Okay, so in this time period, Ted Bundy has gained a lot of female followers. His face is plastered on TV all the freaking time. People see him there. And these women kind of become enamored with him. And so Carol Ann Boone is one of these women who somehow starts whatever this is with Ted Bundy. Number one, she manages to marry Ted Bundy while he's in prison. Number two, fathered a freaking child. Ted Bundy got a daughter that he fathered while he was in prison.
Yeah.
Hello, conjugal visits. Like, you think you weren't getting some type of special privileges?
Yeah, also, super sperm.
Right? Listen, there is nothing in this world that would make me... I would love to talk to Ted Bundy's daughter. I'm going to throw that out there right now. I know the platform that we're on right now is small, but if you are Ted Bundy's daughter and you are ever willing to talk to me, then I would absolutely... I would talk to you. You haven't...
She just, like, literally just jumped on me. Oh, my God.
Like the cat form of Ted Bundy. What just happened? She just jumped on you and manipulated you like
Ted did. Oh, my God.
You were her prey.
I know.
Listen, guys. So if you're on a show with Chandler and I, we are, like, half true crime and half, like, ASPCA, Sarah McLachlan type shit.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's gonna be the rest of it.
Well, I think too, and I think what we had talked about when we were texting about this, what's so interesting is, yeah, I mean, Ted Bundy, he's in jail, and he has these female followers, and that's not something that's new. Like, no. Richard Ramirez had the same thing.
Yes, but his breath was so bad that a bitch couldn't stand him.
But, you know, I'll put up with a lot of stuff for some good hair, so murder, not so much. But that's when you wonder what's going on with these ladies, and you even see some of them being like, yeah, I don't think he did it. I think he's innocent. Like, he's part of a church. He's a nice guy. We worked together at this, like, emergency unit. He did suicide calls. And there were actually so many ladies that wanted to be part of, they just wanted to be in the courtroom and be close to him, that they literally had to turn people away because it was like a pep rally for him. It wasn't like a court trial. It was like he was about to play the big game and everybody's there watching.
It was, and people saw it. People saw it for that. People almost came in to kind of like try to cheer him on. Even the judge in his final was like, felt like he missed his potential almost.
Yeah.
He missed his potential. Like, he talked about how intelligent that he was and how they saw him play up the cameras. And the judge in his final trial was kind of like, oh man, you know, I really wish we could have gotten you through law school. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? Like, what law school did you go to that this accused murderer and necrophiliac, which we got like 20 minutes left in the show, we got to touch on that shit. You're gonna bring this guy in and treat him like he's a freaking celebrity instead of like the serial killer that he was.
Especially knowing that Ted Bundy's trial was one of the very first televised trials.
It was.
Everyone was popping like a, I don't know if I can say this, but a bing for Bundy.
They were.
Yeah.
They were popping. They had a bony bun, a Bundy boner.
Also, Bundy's workout tape, buns by Bundy.
Yeah. Is that a real thing?
No, but that's how he lost 25 pounds in a week.
Can we make it a thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
My show just got #1. Oh, the explicit rating. Sorry. Bundy Boner, #1. Sorry, guys.
My bad.
No, it's cool. It was coming regardless.
I think we make that workout tape, and I think it's a rule that you have to wear a cardigan while you do it.
You wear a cardigan and your best spandex underneath it, and then that's how you go. Okay, so let's go on to. We've talked about his escape time. We've talked about. They go in detail on the Bundy tapes about his trial and his execution and all this stuff. The one thing that I feel like they didn't talk a lot about, and even when you listen to Ted Bundy's interviews, he was a necrophiliac. Ted Bundy had sex with the dead bodies of some of his victims.
Mm-hmm. And he would dress them and shampoo their hair and put makeup on either their body or their severed head. And he would have sex with them until the bodies were so putrefied that they were decomposing.
Okay, so let's go back to all the serial killers that I've ever, I don't have a favorite serial killer. That's a terrible thing to say.
I gotcha.
I've looked a lot into, I've done a lot of research about Ed Kemper. And when you put Ed Kemper and Ted Bundy together, their lives kind of play out hand in hand. Like, Ed Kemper just didn't have the personality that Bundy did. And so, but it was a lot of the same things. They had the weird mommy issues. They had the same type of, they assaulted women in the same way. And in the end, they came back and they felt like they were only able to perform sexually with these dead bodies. The only way. And so you hear very briefly Ted Bundy and the people who do this documentary talk about it. It's almost like he didn't want to talk about that part of his crime. He was more than excited to talk about murder from a third person point of view.
Right. I think too, because again, this is where I'm disappointed in Netflix, because we've got, Dark Tourist. We've got all of these very dark shows, but they just didn't go into the necrophilia. And yeah, I think that was a little, maybe not embarrassing to him, but I do think he was more shy about it, because as he is quoted, he says where you kill your victims, that's very sacred to you, and the victims become part of you. So that was an intimate relationship for him. I mean, the same with Jeffrey Dahmer as well. And Jeffrey Dahmer had trophies and, collected heads and painted body parts and stuff like that. But I feel like Netflix just didn't dive right into it. They also, and this is a running thread throughout the whole thing, they didn't go into detail about any of his crimes, any of his murders. And I wanted that, and I think we're not, with shows like that and shows like this, we're in no way glorifying him, but it's important to talk about the things that he did, the things that these guys are capable of, especially when it comes to Ted Bundy, because it's everybody knows him for this charismatic man, but you don't know how truly scary he was. You don't know that he, kidnapped 2 women in a day and made one watch the other get raped and murdered. You don't know that he cut off heads and put makeup on them and stuff like that. And that's the stuff that people need to know to stop idealizing him. and treating him like he's some kind of royalty. No, he's a monster.
He was a monster.
But he's fascinating.
Someone posted that said, Bundy had a kid and was married. We recognize that he was married. He had a child, but prior to fathering this child, we don't know what Ted Bundy's sex life was before that. If you're talking about other serial killers like Ed Kemper that said, he couldn't perform sexually unless the victim was dead. We don't know that. Again, this documentary and a lot of the documentaries or books don't go into detail a lot about Bundy's forms of necrophilia with his victims. What we do know there were a lot of victims who were found decapitated. So their heads are in one place, their bodies are separated. And so did he spend his time with one part of the anatomy or the other? Did he separate the heads from these bodies so that it would depersonalize these bodies so that he could perform sexual acts on them? I don't know. I don't know.
I think Bundy was a player. At one point, he was dating like 2 or 3 women at the same time and had both of them believing that they were going to get engaged in the following year. Mm-hmm. And I think, I even believe that he took one of the heads to his girlfriend Elizabeth's house and like put it in the fire and like burned it in her fireplace.
He did burn one of their heads, and I remember that. So it's like almost like he is, he's bringing his alternate ego into his world, and he's trying to combine the two because he did date women. He was a decent looking person,
Can we also quickly talk about the fact that Elizabeth called the police more than twice to report him as a suspect, her boyfriend, and the police just put him on a list of like 200 suspects. If this woman has called you a couple times and she's like, I really do think it might be my boyfriend, and his name is Ted, and he has this Volkswagen, wouldn't you be like, skrrr, like, and all of a sudden, like,
right?
Check out, I put him at the top of your list?
You would think so. You would absolutely think so, but I think I don't know if it was because he was such an upstanding member of the community. People saw him a different light, that they didn't consider him someone who would be possible of these types of crimes. He also volunteered in some type of political rally. Like, he got really into politics at one point, and people really kind of respected him for the position that he took there. So, you talk about these suicide hotlines, these search parties, his political affiliations. Nobody would ever look at him like he was the kind of person who was capable of that type of crime, I guess, in that time period.
But that's why he was so smart. I mean, think about what Gacy was a clown.
Right. He associated with people in the way that he knew would, I think, manipulate them to the point that he wouldn't be caught. And so you talk about the last time that he breaks out of prison. He's in Colorado at that time. He escapes from prison. He hitchhikes his way to the airport. He's got a credit card because he was representing himself as an attorney in these cases. And so he was able to get a plane ticket from Chicago to Florida, where he commits his most heinous crime. 1978, he breaks into the Chi Omega sorority house and assaults and murders many different women. And this is ultimately the end of Ted Bundy's run.
Yeah.
So Go ahead.
But I think even talking about, like, the Chi Omega sorority house, like, again, there wasn't detail in that. I mean, he did, like, he bit the lady, like, the lady's backside. That's how they got the teeth impressions. He bit off one of her nipples. I mean, and again, they don't talk about that, but it's like, that's how scary he was and how much of a monster he was. Also, the fact that I think it was, I don't know, maybe four murders there, but all of this happened within 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And no one heard anything. Like, I believe that there were a couple of witnesses, but, I mean, people were dying, and no one heard a thing in the house.
Someone posted on one of my Facebook comments, so when I posted that we were going to talk about a serial killer tonight, when we were going to talk about Ted Bundy, I had this really obnoxious guy who got on our Facebook feed, and like 130 comments later, I finally had to block the guy because he was just he just wanted to name call and be, an ass clown. But in the midst of all of that, someone came forward and said that I think she said it was her aunt, actually lived in or around the sorority house when that happened. And if that was the case, I would love to talk to these people. And that her aunt was a witness to all of this. Like, she was a witness against Ted Bundy in his criminal case. And I'm like, how many people could have come forward and said you were witnesses against him? Think about the women that he abducted. I don't remember the name of the lake, but he went to this lake and he had his arm in a sling. He literally abducted 2 women in the same day because he had his arm in a sling, and he convinced these women that he was rich and he had a boat and that he needed help with something on the boat, and these women went with him. And that's terrible. That's to think that he was that narcissistic. He was able to lure these women away. But there are people out there who were still, victims of this crime who think about it every day.
I mean, even his friends were like, "Hey, Ted, this sketch kind of looks like you. This guy's name is Ted. He drives a
Volkswagen."
And you're like, what are these people thinking?
Yeah. It was a different era. It was a different era. I think people didn't think about that type of situation. They didn't think about serial killers. They didn't think about people out to harm them all the time, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, meanwhile, the 1970s and 80s is when, like, serial killers, like, really ramped up. I mean, that's when you had Charles Manson and BTK and, the Green River Killer. And,
It was. And it was because people were a little naive to that sort of thing. They thought that everybody, was out to, be their friend. And, the news media didn't have the access to covering stories like that, like they do now. So, I think it was just a level of, you didn't see it. You didn't see it coming. And that's what made it so terrible for these people who were part of these crimes. And so we're like 5 minutes left in the show right now, Chandler.
Oh,
no, we have so much more to talk about. You're going to come back on again, obviously. So when you're thinking about Ted Bundy and his crimes as a whole and the way that he's been portrayed, what are your thoughts on all of it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I do think that he is one of the smartest serial killers, and not necessarily, maybe it's not that he's smart, but he was, like you said earlier, very manipulative. Mm-hmm. And I do think he outsmarted a lot of people with his charm and, being a narcissist and probably having borderline personality disorder or whatever else. I do find him fascinating because, he did all these heinous things. He also worked with the police to help find the Green River Killer. I wish...
I've got a really interesting comment right here. Candace Carpenter Kingsford said, my mom had a close encounter with Ted Bundy in Utah. He was a law student. Candace, do you want to elaborate on that? Because I would love to
tell us.
Hear what you have to say about that. But yeah, he did. He went to Utah. He was part of the Church of Latter-day Saints. She says, my dad studied him when he was in college working on his master's in criminal law. Interesting. Do you remember Candace, your dad saying anything about him? Like his personality, his traits, like anything that would have... That's what fascinates me, is that these people, they just went about their daily life. I don't think anybody would have associated him with the stuff that he did.
No, because I think he was mediocre. Before he was a serial killer, he was mediocre. And I think that his entire life, he just tried to live up to this inflated sense of self that he had. And then when he found out that killing gave him that little bit of self and that little spark of happiness, I think he held on to it and was like, okay, this is going to be my thing. And then, he's notorious now. He got everything that he wanted.
I think it gave him a level of power that he wanted in his life, that he knew he would never be able to... Actually, I don't know. I think he thought that he would outsmart these people at some point and that he would have gotten out of prison. Because even up until he was executed, the last moments before his execution, I remember, if they talk about, accurately in this documentary, like the last thing that he said was something like, I'm sorry I caused you guys so much trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the whole way that he was executed, I think that also looked like a pep rally. I know people were excited, but it was just weird, and...
People sold fucking t-shirts.
I know, and just odd, and these were, people that weren't necessarily, victims' family members. It was just, douchey kids at college.
That
were 8.
At FSU, where the Chi Omega house was. I'm in the last couple of minutes of the show right now. I'm reading a couple of comments. He was so likable. It was scary. He had social skills. Have you guys ever caught anything from his past life in the paranormal? I have not, because I've never been anywhere that I thought Ted Bundy would appear. But if that were the case, I would absolutely be there, because I am 100% all about that.
Oh my God, talk about a boner. I have
you have a Bundy boner right now, don't you? It just went straight up like that. Kimberly is asking about the portrait behind you. Kimberly, if you're asking about the portrait behind me, this was purchased. My house is full of old portraits, antique portraits. And this is just one of them that was purchased in Lancaster, Ohio, that we have called Freddie Mercury. I call him Freddie Mercury because I think he looks like that. But I have antique portraits all over my house. So yeah, that was it. So guys, it's 9 o'clock. I've got to wrap up. Chandler, this is just episode 1 of Serial Killers Anonymous. We're going to have more episodes, please, because I have so many more people that I want to talk to. Are you guys ever coming to Moundsville? I'm not far from Moundsville, so So Derek, if that's something that you're interested in, hit us up, because that's absolutely a possibility. I'm not far from Moundsville at all.
Yeah, part of Most Terrifying Places, we were in Moundsville.
Yes. I forgot about that. Oh my God, that's how we met and fell in love. The city looks like Jesse James. Oh, or Weston. Yes, Weston is not far from me also. A lot of places in West Virginia. So guys, thank you so much for being a part of the very first episode of RUWeebs Live on Paranormal Warehouse. Please, if you like our show, next week we'll be back with some paranormal stuff. So tune in next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Paranormal Warehouse. Feel free to like and comment if you have any places that you would like us to visit, or if there are topics that you would like us to talk about. Thank you guys so much. Huge thank you to Chandler for being a part. You're going to come back again. So absolutely, every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Paranormal Warehouse. Good night, guys.
Bye, y'all.